Hi, this is my review of Ruins of Azlant, Beyond the Veiled Past by Thurston Hillman. This is the sixth part in the adventure path that features the conspiracy of Ohimwa, of the secrets and artifacts of the Empire of Azlant, and how the characters are trying to stop Ohimwa. Now, I think it's excellent that despite having different authors participating in the adventure path, you can see the level of consistency, of coherence, of balance in the entire adventure path. However, with this climax of the Ruins of Azlant, this is probably the part with the most freedom for the characters to act, and with a lot of outcomes based on the order of things. If they decide to go through different events, they may actually have a more difficult or easier time when confronting Ohimwa at last. Now, let's start talking about the quality of the maps. With this adventure, you have a set of maps, and just like the other maps in the adventure path, you can turn the map tags on and off. You can also turn the grid on and off as well. So you can present these maps to your players however you like. And it's very easy for you as a game master to keep track of things, because the maps are very clear. It's quite easy to figure out how events and different encounters are going to progress through different areas or stages of the adventure. When it comes to the adventure itself, the quality is great. The document is fully bookmarked, the graphic design and the illustrations look awesome. I think I only found a single typo in the entire adventure, but everything is well written and explained. It's quite easy for you to navigate the entire PDF, moving from one section to another. Now let's talk about the contents of the adventure. And this review will contain spoilers. And if you haven't seen my reviews of the other parts of the adventure path, I recommend that you check out the links in the description below. So this is it. This is the final encounter with Ohimwa. This adventure is quite different from the others, in the sense that there is going to be an explosion of events and encounters through different parts that the player characters have already explored. Different factions and characters that the player characters have interacted with are going to need their help. So it's up to the party to decide if they want to speed up ahead and go towards the compass, which is the secret facility that houses many doomsday type of weapons. And because Ohimwa already knows about the compass and has successfully infiltrated it, the player characters feel like it's a race against time. However, their allies will probably need help against different minions of Ohimwa. All of his forces and his agents and his entire army are going to be attacking different sections, different populations. So the player characters need to decide if it's more important to infiltrate the compass already, or if they want to help their allies and possibly getting some advantage or cooperation from such events. You can have it any way that you like. There is a lot of freedom in this adventure. However, if the characters decide to ignore their allies, things could potentially go a bit more difficult later on, because anything that the player characters do to aid their allies, they will receive cooperation, they will have a chance to resupply, and also they will find some opportunities to cripple or sabotage Ohimwa's army. For example, first, the player characters may decide to go back to Talmandor's bounty. Things are somewhat paranoid, because the agents of Ohimwa have managed to drive the Locathas out of their environment, and now they are seeking help, or at the very least some sort of support from Talmandor's bounty. But this is somewhat difficult because a new shipment has arrived, sent by the Bountiful Venture Company. This shipment included a group of soldiers, and they are quite suspicious of the Locathas. But there is more to things that you would expect at first. On one hand, the Locathans have been infiltrated by shapeshifters, in the service of Ohimwa, of course. And on the side of the soldiers, a lot of the soldiers have been mind controlled by Ohimwa. So now you have two forces with individuals that have been strategically placed so that they stop alliances between the inhabitants of Talmandor's bounty and the Locathas. So it is up to the player characters to see if they can neutralize these agents of Ohimwa. Maybe they will have to kill some of them, but it's in their best interest if they, for example, release the soldiers from the mind control. They could actually gain cooperation from the soldiers. They could actually assist them. If, hopefully, the player characters manage to attain some sort of cooperation between the Locathas and Telmandor's bounty, they will be attacked by the Ulat Kini, who are the monstrous aquatic humanoids in the service of Ohimwa. One of them in particular, by the name of Shadowpeck, has quite a bit of an ego, so he will actively search for the player characters to defeat them in combat. Meanwhile, in Talasantri, the player characters know of a new threat. There is this monstrous Plankta by the name of Ruinquake. Ruinquake is an embodiment of the suffering that many beings experienced during the cataclysm of the Earthfall. So it's a very destructive entity. And agents of Ohimwa have actually provoked this Ruinquake Plankta into moving towards Talasantri with intent to destroy everyone. So player characters will have to fight against these merfolk instigators, while at the same time finding some way to neutralize Runequake. They will find the task a bit more easy if they wield the legendary spear that they potentially recovered in a former part of the adventure path. And then there is the problem of Ohimwa's main force. This massive army is quite unbeatable for the player characters to take on, so they need to resort to some sort of guerrilla warfare or sabotage. There are ways in which they can cripple Ohimwa's forces so that the different populations have an easier time fighting against them, and if needed, the player characters will also have an advantage if they need to fight a section of this force. In order for the player characters to neutralize or cripple this army, they need to take care of some key targets. For example, there is this dreadful doctor, the flesh warper known as Hacksaw. She is a deadly scientist that operates all sorts of mutation and questionable experiments over the forces of Ohimwa. If the player characters manage to defeat this Dr. Hacksaw, the forces of Ohimwa won't have the advantage of the flesh warped operations that Hacksaw would have employed to boost the soldiers of Ohimwa. The player characters could also destroy mesh nodes that allow for an easier mind control relay over the entire force of the army, but these nodes have some powerful defenses around them, some deadly defenses even, so the player characters will have to think of a way of neutralizing these fleshy nodes while not getting affected by the different traps. They could also destroy the different transports, stopping the army from mobilizing quickly and efficiently through any sort of operation that they wish to carry out. As you can see, the player characters have a lot of options on how to approach the compass with ample preparation for the final battle. However, there are many tips and advice through the entire document telling you how the events proceed, perhaps simultaneously. That is, the player characters could be taking care of some particular encounter and they get some sort of news or message of what is going on in different zones related to their allies. So I think this is a great way for the game master to handle the difficulty of the adventure. If you feel that the player characters are having a bit of an easy time, too much of an easy time tackling the different events, you could have some emergencies happen. Maybe a non-player character arrives requesting the player character's help, or maybe some places where the battle should have turned in favor of the player characters, it has actually happened the other way around. Now the forces of Ohimwa have taken control over an entire zone, and this could present greater difficulty during this adventure or even after it. When the player characters finally arrive to the area where the compass is located, they will experience an even greater sense of the lost glory of the Azlanti Empire. For example, you have a set of ion towers, and these towers acted as sort of arcane signal transmitters. They blanketed different areas with magical effects, but almost all of them are inactive. The only one active is still producing this effect so that any living being in this island does not need water or food to survive. The player characters will need to navigate the natural environment, but also structures and traps, some of them placed by Ohimwa, some others of the Azlanti Empire. Because, for example, you have a moon gate that has actually served to bring into this plane of existence a few very nasty creatures known as the Somalzigots that are quite hungry, and the player characters will have to find a way to avoid them or defeat them in combat. The player characters could also find some very unusual allies. One of them is the Gardener. The Gardener has been placed as a sort of guardian or caretaker. However, because his masters have been long gone, or its masters rather, because it's more like a construct, it is a bit without a sense of purpose. But if the player characters handle things diplomatically, he may actually assist them in getting into the compass, into this ancient facility of hidden weapons. The inside of the compass is all science fantasy. There's a lot of ancient and mysterious Azlanti technology. Many of it is powered by different ion stone keys. So it is up to the player characters to enter this facility and avoid all of the different symbol traps that Ohimwa has been putting all over the place. There are also a lot of clockwork guardians left by the Azlanti Empire, and many of Ohimwa's present agents waiting for the right opportunity to strike. A lot of the places inside this facility have some strange rotations and movements. The player characters will have to be very perceptive and intelligent as to how they navigate this place. Some of the rooms could actually change and the corridors according to very subtle rotations, so the player characters can get a sense of displacement inside the compass. There are also many effects and traps that will make the navigation a bit more difficult, and considering the rotation effect, it's not going to be easy, for example, to use teleport spells, because maybe you decide to go into a room through the teleport effect, and that room is no longer there because of the rotation. You may end up killing yourself. There are also some presences related to the Azlanti Empire. Some of them have undergone some radical transformations. Some are quite hostile. For example, Rashimos, who was once a very powerful general, has sold her soul to a demon lord. So now she is a demonic entity ready to punish the player characters, all in service to her demonic lord that ironically has been dead for a long time. There are other beings, such as for example Lurisian, who has ascended into a state of a nascent Manasaputra. So she is a being of the positive energy plane, quite disconnected or distant from mortal affairs, but there is a way to persuade her so that she gives some clues to the player characters. But perhaps the most important Azlanti presence inside the facility is Yazradan. Yazradan has been stealthily observing the player characters since the beginning of the adventure path. But now this ghostly being finally decides to reveal itself in front of the player characters. Yazradan acts as an ally, giving some clues as to how to stop Ohimwa in the activation of a very destructive weapon. However, Yazradan wants to use this weapon, this synchrony device, for his own benefit. This is a very vengeful ghost. He only wants to see the Algolthus, that is Ohimwa's main faction, to be completely destroyed, and he doesn't care how much damage he will do to the surface world, as long as he can get even with Ohimwa because of the destruction of the Azlanti Empire. So it is up to the player characters to be quite perceptive and to piece together the different clues. Many clockwork beings and oozes, some of them quite strange because, for example, we have this spellcaster that has transformed himself into a sort of intelligent ooze. So he has the powers of both a spellcaster and an ooze. He's going to try to gain as much information from the outside world, from the player characters, and then destroy them. The player characters will also have some opportunities to tinker with the different devices and special rooms within the compass, but they must be careful. There are treasures within, some of them quite useful. Some, for example, there is a crossbow that is quite lethal when used against aberrations. But there are also some very deadly things. For example, there is this trapped aboleth inside of a room that could attempt a mind swap with one of the player characters. Many experiments and even extraplanar beings that have decided to take home inside of the compass will also pose some obstacles for the player characters. So be it through combat, avoidance, or diplomacy, the player characters will have to find a way to navigate these obstacles to get to the rooms where the synchrony device is being kept. Now, how does this synchrony device work? Well, it's basically a planar bomb. It allows part of the essence of another plane to somehow get transferred to this material plane. And once it is in the material plane, you can release any sort of effect in a designated zone or area. So for example, if you wanted to, you could connect the plane of fire with a particular zone, and so that zone will be completely burned perpetually. However, this device has not been tested, and what the Azlanti did not know is that they can actually gate beings from that plane, and they do not have complete control. Once the player characters actually reach the room of the synchrony device, things will develop as a three-way battle between the player characters, Ohimwa and his Abeloth allies, but also Yazradan. So they are all going to fight for their own purposes, their own objectives. Yazradan is going to completely drop his facade of being an ally for the player characters. Ohimwa is pretty much trying to destroy everyone. And the player characters not only have to deal with these powerful enemies, they also have a countdown, a limited number of turns for them to somehow deactivate the synchrony device. You even have information on what happens if the device actually detonates. It causes so much damage, it's going to be very difficult for the player characters to survive, and it will have some long-term consequences on the area both inside and around the compass. So hopefully the player characters will have a chance to defeat Ohimwa, Yazradan, and neutralize this doomsday device. Now, at the end of the document, you have other sections that will help you if you want to continue adventures after the conclusion of the Ruins of Azlant. So all of the major participants have their stats and background information here. You also have a lot of tips and advice on how to continue the campaign as a sort of spin-off campaign or separate adventures with information of other devices. The Azlanti Empire was quite extensive, so maybe there are many other dangerous weapons, not only inside of the compass, maybe there are other hidden facilities. You have information on different factions that could be interested in these devices and facilities, such as the Algolthus. Ohimwa was not the only member of this vile organization. You also have information on the cult of Rovagug and the Unwavering Path. Maybe they still want to get their hands on the synchrony device. Maybe the player characters will decide to keep the synchrony device. Maybe they do not destroy it. Maybe they want to power it down and keep it just as in standby and see what use they can gain of it. You also have information of what happens if the player characters fail. As I was telling you, they expand more on this. You also have more about the Algolthus agenda, the plots of the Veiled Masters. A lot of conspiracy material here with the different non-player characters belonging to the faction and their agendas, their allies, and their enemies. You also have information on how to handle anything related to the Azlanti Empire in the modern day. How to, for example, create non-player characters or even player characters of Azlanti origin and how to play as an Azlanti. You even have a sample non-player character. And of course you have a bestiary with different creatures and table of encounters. You have some extraplanar beings or outsiders such as the Pridanu Azata that could potentially serve as an ally. You also have some unusual undead such as the Flux Wraith. Many of the entries in this bestiary have a strong science fantasy feel to them, but it's very easy to integrate them in any sort of campaign or adventure that you want. They do not feel disconnected. So what do I think of this last part of the Ruins of Azlant? Beyond the Veiled Past. I think this is a great way to bring the adventure path to a conclusion. I also like it that they give you tips and advice on how to continue the campaign if you want to move further. Even if you want to handle things as sort of spin-off situations that have somehow resulted from the outcome of this adventure, or if you want to have some adventures on the side, almost unrelated to this main plotline, you're going to find the information for all of that here. I really like that you have different events concerning the allies of the player characters, that you put them in that position that they have to decide if they want to help their allies or if they want to speed up straight to Ohimwa. They could be thinking that the most important thing is stopping the synchrony device from being activated, even if it costs the lives of their allies. Even if they finish the adventure, maybe their allies could be quite angry that the player characters did not go and back them up in their moment of need. And if player characters decide to aid all of the different factions and non-player characters, maybe that could also result in very helpful and positive things if the adventure is decided to be continued, or even if you play with a different group of adventurers. Maybe now, for example, Talmander's Bounty has made a very strong relationship with the Locathans, and the colonization effort goes beyond what is expected. Maybe the venture company is quite pleased and further colonies will be established. You could handle things in so many different ways. I think the adventure also keeps a good balance of the natural environment, architecture, and artifacts and devices within the compass. I also like it that the player characters could feel that it's a very straightforward affair, but with the betrayal of Yazradan and different strange creatures that they could find inside of the compass, including the transformed Azlanti. They will have to do their best at both combat and diplomacy within the compass. This could have ended up as a very simple fight or gauntlet type of encounter at the end. However, because they combine all of these different variants or factors to be overcome through different skills and abilities and spells, the player characters will have a very exciting and difficult challenge as they try to stop Ohimwa and Yazradan and the Synchrony device, and perhaps even taking control of the device for future developments. So I highly recommend that you get beyond the Veiled Past to bring the Runes of Azlant adventure path to a conclusion. And as to my thoughts on the adventure path as a whole, I think it's excellent, an amazing adventure path that gives you exploration, investigation, combat, some very unusual underwater encounters, a lot of science fantasy moments, and conspiracies all around. Well, thanks for watching my review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. See you later.